Let me begin with a question. Are we ready to hear and respond to our readings today, especially to the gospel? First, I think we need to hear again and again that Jesus will not and never did accept the common belief that suffering, human suffering, is as a result of some kind of human infraction of a religious rule. That is not who Jesus is. That is not the God whom Jesus preached. But rather, Jesus' message is quite the contrary. He has come to spread the good news of the kingdom of God. For this purpose I have come, he says in the Gospel of Mark. For Jesus has come not simply to cure, but rather to bring God's healing presence into the midst of human suffering. A healing presence of mind, body, and spirit. A healing presence that gives us an ultimate hope that following Jesus, all will be good. Have you ever thought of the difference between curing and healing? People can be cured of a disease, but healing takes on a much deeper dimension. For we speak of healing a person, of healing the whole person. Someone once said that with a cure, it's an end. But healing is a threshold between where we are now and a different state of being where we are healed and we can breathe more easily. And although Mark in the gospel does not give us any details, there's every indication that Simon's mother-in-law was both cured and healed. Just think of it, and think of how we share in Peter's mother-in-law's condition. She suffers. And then Jesus takes her by the hand. He loved her at the inner core of her suffering, and his life flowed into hers. That's going to happen with Eloise today. Jesus' life is going to flow into her through the waters of baptism. And what did Jesus do to Peter's mother-in-law? He lifts her up. Eloise will be lifted up today by the Lord. And the fever left her. And then her service began. Jesus, isn't it interesting that no one asked Peter's mother-in-law to serve? She just did it out of that inner healing. Maybe, in a sense, Peter's mother-in-law is Jesus' first deacon, because the word deacon comes from the Greek word diakonia, meaning to serve. And that's precisely what she did. Each day, I hope you agree that we have new evidence that the world is in desperate need of healing. We are so divided. We as church need healing. We as a nation, as a world, our families, we as individuals need healing. And yet we do not despair. We don't lose hope. We turn to Jesus, and I hope you can experience Jesus today, grasping you by the hand and just drawing you forth to the table of the Lord. You know, Eloise enters the church through the waters of baptism. And the waters of baptism are aligned in a straight line to the table of the Lord. There's a pathway that goes back and forth. And I hope that you as parents and godparents make that pathway a well-worn pathway. What about us? What about you and me? How did Jesus' words and example really continue to shape and reshape our attitudes and our actions? To what extent, this is a hard question, to what extent do we merely admire Jesus, or are we truly Jesus' followers? And today, that question is at the center. It forms the context of our annual diocesan appeal. Sorry we have to talk about this, but we really do. The stewardship office has sent many mailings over the last number of months, but there's nothing better than doing an in-pew, a good old-fashioned in-pew ask, as we used to do for several years. So our assessment for this parish is $83,322. And to date, we have received $41,724 from 127 donors. It's 50% right on the nose. But that means we still have $45,598 to achieve our assessment by the end of June of this year. So let me just make some brief, important points as to why, we do this every year, and sometimes we kind of forget our perspective. Here's how we, as a parish, and all parishes benefit from the diocesan appeal. Because basically, these funds run the Diocese of Albany. Without these funds, the Diocese of Albany doesn't have any money to operate. It all comes from the people, basically. Our parish faith formation benefits through all kinds of resources, programs, and ongoing formation for our leaders. Carrie has been involved in ongoing formation, and Laurie has too. A number of our staff are undergoing ongoing formation. The baptismal preparation program is helped out by our faith formation program within the diocese. Catholic Charities, that they serve over 100,000 people a year in this diocese? That's a stunning number. 100,000 people with food, shelter, emergency assistance, ministering to pregnant and parenting teenagers. And a lot of times we say we got to get people to come to church. Yes, we do, but there's a corollary to that says we need to bring the church to the people. And that's exactly what Catholic Charities is doing, because they're out, boots on the ground, in the grassroots of our diocese. Our dollars benefit Catholic schools. And in last week's bulletin, on the face of the bulletin, I did a little article on Catholic schools, but I'm not going to spend any time on that because that's there. But let me just say that it is a very interesting statistic, I guess you could say, that so many of our priests were educated in Catholic schools. I don't think it's an accident that there's a correlation between being educated in a Catholic school and a vocation. And speaking of vocations, your dollars support the vocation office. Do you know that it costs, and we've had seminarians here before, it costs north of $300,000 to educate a seminarian from beginning to ordination? It's not cheap, but it's such a valuable and necessary investment. So right now we have 15 seminarians in various stages of seminary development. In terms of the permanent diaconate, of which I am one, we have 2 candidates, 5 aspirants, and 5 inquirers, meaning they're kind of interested in finding out. Our dollars support our human resource department at the diocese. There are so many regulations that we need to conform with from a human resource point of view, or for us old-timers, a personnel point of view. We could never keep up with them all. Your dollars help support the human resource area in our diocese. And, as I said recently, it supports Father Kane's ecumenical office. And if he were here, he'd give a big thumbs up. Your dollars are only used, and I can't stress this enough, only for the operation of the diocese itself, to carry out the mission of Jesus Christ in our time. And it is outside the purview of any Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That bankruptcy cannot compromise or obviate the mission of the Diocese of Albany, the mission of Jesus Christ. And no funds, and this is a frequently asked question, no funds are used to settle any lawsuits related to abuse. There are separate resources for that. These dollars run the Diocese of Albany. And so each parish is obligated, and I don't use that term lightly, we are obligated to contribute to the appeal through the direct generosity of our people. And the reality is that any shortfall must be made up from our parish resources. So each year we're asked to say yes to this critical appeal by participating according to your means, but your participation, regardless of how much, is critical. You know, we've got in this parish registered, we've got about 1,600 households registered. We hear from very few of them. But if we had all of them participate, we would be well beyond our assessment. So today, as soon as I'm finished in just a couple of seconds, I'm going to ask you to take a look at the envelopes that are in your pew. There are pencils there also. And if you could, between now and the time the collection is taken up, and we're going to do the baptism in between, if you could please prayerfully consider what your contribution could be this year. And if you've already contributed, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. But I have to ask, if you could do a little more, that would be great too. You can do it by pledging. You can do it by making a payment now. You can do it by pledging or making a payment now. Or you can do it online, which is the way that Joan and I do it, is online giving. So as each of us decides on our level of participation, let us ask ourselves, go back to that question. Go back to that question. Am I only an admirer of Jesus Christ, or am I truly his follower? So please join Joan and me in completing your diocesan appeal envelope. And I have to get an envelope.